In this video, I'm gonna share my most used gear in 2020. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer and a Lumix ambassador. And now, today when I publish this video, it's the Christmas day, so happy Christmas and happy holidays to you, whichever way you prefer it. And in this video, I'm gonna share my most used gear in 2020. I like to check that at around this time of the year, just like a summary of the year. Not that it makes me any better or worse photographer, but it's fun to know which gear I really used. And Lightroom can tell me everything. It can tell me how many frames I shot on each camera and each lens. It can even tell me which apertures I used and which focal lengths I used and all that. But I'm not gonna go through all those numbers because that would be too much. I'm just gonna go through my 3 most used cameras and lenses in 2020. And sometimes these numbers can also offer some surprises. And it certainly happened to me this year. The camera that according to Lightroom, that I have used the most is not the camera that I expected it to be. But let's dive into it and see how many pictures I shot and which cameras I really used. First of all, I took almost 12,000 pictures in 2020. And it's about 4,000 less than last year in 2019. But it's still a fair number, almost or about 30 pictures every day. And we all know that quality and quantity don't always go hand in hand, so the sheer number of pictures doesn't really tell that much. In this case, it tells that I've been relatively active, but nothing else. But let's see which cameras I used. First of all, the camera that I've used the most is the Lumix S1R. And this was a surprise because I always think that I use this camera too little. But according to Lightroom, it's my most used camera. I have fired this camera just over 3,000 times this year. But I have not abandoned my Micro Four Thirds gear because my second and third favorite or most used cameras are both Micro Four Thirds cameras. The second most used camera is the Lumix G9 and my third most used camera is the Lumix G90. And on both these cameras I have shot almost 3,000 pictures, so almost as much on both of these as on the S1R. So about 1/3 of my pictures were shot on the S1R and 2/3 on these two cameras, the G9 and G90. I have used some other cameras too because I have so many of them, but these 3 cameras are my most used cameras in 2020. But my most used camera, the S1R, was a surprise. I wasn't expecting that. I thought my most used camera was either the G9 or G90. And now let's check out which lenses I used most in 2020. My most used lens is also kind of a surprise. Even though now that I know which camera I used, it's not such a big surprise anymore, but still my most used lens is the Lumix S24-205 f4 zoom lens. But still I wonder because I also feel, with this lens I feel that I don't use it so much, but apparently I have used it more than any other lens in 2020. So that's kind of interesting. And my second most used lens, that was a really big surprise, is the 50-200mm f2.8 f4 Leica Micro Four Thirds telephoto zoom lens. And this was a big surprise because I haven't really used this lens many times this year. But when I was looking at my pictures that I shot on this lens, it appears that when the firmware update came to the G9, I went to shoot some flying birds, and I shot more than 500 pictures in a very short time, and because of that this lens shows up in the statistics. But I haven't really used this lens very much, only a few times this year. So it's a bit of a misleading information there. But if I look at just the numbers, this is my second most used lens this year. And my third most used lens is, and that makes a lot of sense, that's the Leica 25mm f1.4 micro four thirds lens. And this makes a lot of sense because I love this lens and I know that I've used this lens a lot. And all these numbers are kind of interesting, and I'd like to know if you come across similar surprises ever when you look at your data, which lenses you have used or which cameras. Does something like this ever happen to you? And also please comment down below which was your favorite or most used camera and lens in 2020. I'd like to know that. Please leave a comment down below. And I almost forgot, I need to mention also my fourth most used lens because that was a big surprise too. And that lens is the Lumix 12 to 35mm f2.8 zoom lens. And I really do like this lens, but I always feel I don't use it enough. But according to Lightroom, I have used it quite a lot. So that was another surprise. And then I have some cameras and lenses that I hardly ever use for photography, and one of those cameras is the Lumix GH5S that is filming me right now. I've only taken 45 photographs on that camera in 2020. And also the lens that is on the Lumix GH5S right now filming me, the Leica 10 to 25mm f1.7. I have taken 14 pictures on that lens, 14 photographs on that lens in 2020. It's a magnificent lens, but I use it only for video. And what else do these numbers tell me? Well, they tell me that in 2020 Micro Four Thirds has been my most used camera system still. I've taken about 2/3 of all my pictures on a Micro Four Thirds camera and about 1/3 on a full frame S-series camera. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year in 2021, if that is going to change, and which system am I going to use more next year. As you can see from these numbers, I love both systems and I use both systems a lot. And all in all, it's been a very interesting year, and it's not been all bad for me. But when I look at the pictures that I've shot this year, I can see that they are changing, or I've been shooting something that I haven't been shooting so much earlier. Usually I like to shoot some urban scenes or street photography, but this year I've been shooting a lot some kind of landscape or nature subjects, and I guess it's because of the COVID-19 situation. I haven't been very comfortable in public places. I've been much more comfortable all by myself somewhere in the middle of nowhere, or at least somewhere in nature. But what about you? Has your photography changed in 2020? Have you been shooting more or less compared to previous years, and have you also been looking for alternative subjects or scenes to shoot like I have? Before I wrap this up, I'd like to thank you all for watching my videos and supporting my channel. It really means a lot to me, and I really do appreciate it. And I learn every day a lot from your comments and the messages that I receive. This is gonna be my last video this year, but I'll be back next year. I'm not gonna go anywhere, and I hope to see you back also next year. Meanwhile, stay healthy, stay safe, and see you next year in the next video.